The relationship between the conglomerate IG Farben, of which the controlling interests formed the core of the deep state and was the driving force behind Adolf Hitler's rise and fall and the political leadership of Germany, was not as uncomplicated as many might think. And the role of private Swedish interests in its emergence was of a magnitude not yet widely understood, and mainly the reason why the USA and the Allies were compelled to release the Wallenbergs after the Washington negotiations following the Bosch affair. And we have to bear in mind that things that have been lost to the darkness of history only become truly apparent when illuminated with the light from reality. So let us then shed some reality at some crucial historic details for a further understanding of these issues. No stranger to Sweden, Abram Hewitt, involved in government service, was connected to diplomatic and intelligence activities and had many influential contacts, including the wealthy businessman Jacob Wallenberg. He had met Wallenberg in 1932 while representing a bankruptcy trustee for the International Match Corporation, following the death of Swedish business tycoon Ivar Kruger. During the company's reorganization, the Wallenbergs gained control over the Swedish Match Corporation, Tändsticksbolaget, and its distant international subsidiaries, and also, of course, the telecom company Ericsson. More than a decade later, in August 1943, amid the war raging in Europe, Hewitt reconnected with his old acquaintance. Or perhaps it was the other way around. In early October 1943, Jacob Wallenberg arranged for him to meet a Dr. Felix Kirsten. Dr. Felix Kirsten was a European nerve specialist and the private physician to high-ranking German officials, including Heinrich Himmler and Adolf Hitler. 3 months would pass before Wallenberg and Hewitt met again. In the interim, Himmler had been appointed as interior minister by Hitler, further strengthening his position. When Jacob Wallenberg finally reappeared, having been in Germany or elsewhere in Europe, he reported that the resistance situation in Germany had changed due to increased Gestapo focus on the military, particularly Abwehr dissidents and certain prominent civilians allied with them in the German resistance. According to Hewitt's report, Wallenberg believed that the only alternatives to Hitler were Himmler, behind the Waffen SS and Gestapo and Wehrmacht secret opposition cells. If they could survive Gestapo harassment and rally the army's main body before Hitler became aware of what was happening and destroyed them. However, it had already become clear to Hewitt that the secret organized opposition against Hitler was a complicated matter. So when Adolf Hitler turned on his financial backers, like the Wallenbergs, and the situation among the backers themselves was in fact a struggle for dominance within the deep state. And the fact that Nazi Germany was thoroughly infiltrated by the interests of the deep state is no longer a question. It was a fact. Instead of a fantastic mystery, the parachute jump shortly before midnight on the 10th of May, 1941, made by Rudolph Hess into Scotland, is much more an explanation of historical reality. This is pretty obvious due to the 180-degree change in behavior from the USA regarding its involvement in the war after this incident. Since history is written by the victors, what it will not explain or even mention is that the deep state in England and the USA had entirely different reasons for funding Adolf Hitler's plans. While this British arm of the deep state wanted Germany to crush all other smaller colonial empires, to consolidate its own, destroy the dangerous Soviet Union, and even deport every European Jew to Palestine, to create a natural resource control flow through Israel, to ultimately implement the Balfour Declaration of 1917. The American part of the deep state's goal was definitely not the same as England's. In fact, it was originally diametrically opposed. The American arm of the deep state simply financed Hitler to crush the old British colonial empire and completely take over the role of the hegemonic leader in the New World Order, as introduced in 1946. Reduced to a much simpler formula, Wall Street was attempting to replace the City of London by invading England, and especially the City of London, a small part of the capital functioning as an independent state. Hitler would have destroyed the city empire. The City of London was the world's financial power center and richest square kilometer on the planet, hosting the Bank of England, London Lloyd, London Stock Exchange, and all other British banks. Everything points to the fact that American banks and industries had armed Hitler to the teeth to deliver a death blow straight into the heart of the British Empire's financial system. After a century and a half of a global empire spanning over 17 million square miles, or a third of the planet, England was suddenly reduced to an American vassal state after World War II. Remember how Roosevelt and Stalin were involved in dividing the world at the Tehran Conference, while Churchill was left out on the sidelines? Logical analysis and circumstances prove that this theory is the most plausible. Regarding Rudolph Hess's mission, the purpose of this trip finally makes perfect logical sense. And believing that Hess never met Churchill or any other city representative at such a critical moment is just ridiculous. The deputy Führer had parachuted in to tell England what the American bankers expected from Germany when it came to destroying the city of London. But mainly that Hitler was ready to betray his main financiers under certain conditions. The Führer was willing to take his chances with the British Empire in the long run and believed that Germany would get to share a part of the empire. This turned out to be another of Hitler's miscalculations of the future, as he also had claimed that the Third Reich would last for 1,000 years. Churchill agreed with Hess so far as Germany attacked the Soviet Union the month after, since the only other option for Germany was to invade England to fulfill its contract with its American financiers, with the same hopes of sharing their version of hegemony. Germany and England continued to clash sporadically over the next few months, but it was mainly a war for profit. Destroying cities, sinking ships in the middle of the sea, blowing up tanks in the desert. Nothing that couldn't be rebuilt or repurchased by the military-industrial complex, and especially nothing of real strategic significance. And again, it only got serious between them after Stalingrad, the military turning point of World War II. In a normal and truthful world, as most of us like to imagine it, peace between Germany and England would have been discussed in a third country, through an official meeting between the two governments. However, reality explains the otherwise inexplicable fact that Germany wanted to keep the mission a total secret from anyone wielding influence in Germany. When Hess landed on a remote farm in Scotland, American bankers quickly realized that their first major proxy, the Nazis, were no longer working for them. And if they hoped to lead the new world order after the war, they now had to enter the war to end it themselves. And quickly. It is very clear why this powerful German dilemma, which was shaping the world until today, could not be discussed over a telephone line or written on a scroll to be carried by a dove, why every document about this was kept secret. Because this shows how treacherous the leaders of these two moral defenders of human rights and democracy can be, even against each other. Revealing the documents would also expose their lies to keep everyone ignorant of the real history, as the uncomfortable truth about the Hess mission changes our entire perception of the war, but even more so of our world. So, when Hitler realized that everyone had figured out the mission, he panicked and was the first to declare that his old friend Rudolph Hess had gone mad and had escaped from Germany. It took many years for Mrs. Hess to see her husband again, when she at last was allowed to visit him in Spandau for 30 minutes. When asked in a filmed interview if her husband was insane, she replied, "By reading all the letters he wrote to me over the years, I can say that if Rudolph is insane, so am I." World War II divided the first and second parts of the original New World Order plan, which possibly was established in 1773 by Amschel Meyer Rothschild. British colonial empire replaced by the American empire. The same plan for world dominance, but the city of London would now need to share its dominance with a handful of other rapidly emerging interests. When Rudolf Hess said he had come to England to save humanity, could he have been talking about the lesser evil dominance that the British Empire and Germany would have held over the whole world, compared to the totalitarian deep state that is now our reality? Your guess is as good as mine. But what's becoming more clear by the day is that what is currently happening is no longer a struggle within the deep state structure for control of the hegemony. It's total exposure and a complete dismantling by outside forces, And we, the people, have to try to understand what and why this is happening. Some people say the future will prove the past. That may very well be the case, but then it is equally true that in order to understand what is coming, we have to understand where we really are. And that understanding comes from knowing what has been in reality. Winston Churchill once said, "Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it."